on Nord Stream 2, just to follow up on yesterday's announcement, the announcement cited three entities, two that have been sanctioned, TransAdria and then its ship, the Marlin, and then another ship that was not mentioned but is in the report called Blue Ship, which was cited but is not being sanctioned. Can you say why that second ship, Blue Ship, is not being sanctioned but is being cited?
Well, let me start at the top and reiterate, as you heard from the Secretary in his statement again yesterday, that we continue to oppose Nord Stream 2. We continue to believe it is harmful, that it is a Russian geopolitical project. It's a bad deal for Ukraine. It's a bad deal for Europe. That is precisely why we have worked concertedly with our allies and our partners, including the Ukrainians, including our German allies as well, on a package that we announced several months ago now that will mitigate the effects, the pernicious effects of Nord Stream 2. It's also why we continue to act pursuant to PISA, the Protecting Europe's Energy and Security Act, as amended, even as we have worked with allies and partners to ensure that the pipeline is not allowed to circumvent the certification process and the EU's third energy package, including the various requirements that are spelled out there. Requirements for ownership unbundling, the requirements for third-party access to the pipeline to transit gas from sources other than Russia, other than Gazprom. So these measures, again, with the 2021 joint statement that we released together with our German allies, it certainly reduced the risks of an operational NS2 pipeline. It reduced the risks that such a pipeline would pose to European energy security and the security of Ukraine and frontline NATO and EU countries. We are, as you know, we submit a report to Congress every 90 days as we closely monitor developments with regard to Nord Stream 2. We are closely monitoring sanctionable activity. As we collect that information, as we analyze the facts, we are applying those facts to the requirements laid out in this legislation. And so yesterday, you are correct that we did announce two vessels and one Russia-linked entity involved in the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is now falling under our PISA sanctions authority, and we will continue to follow the law, to implement PISA, and as appropriate to sanction entities involved in the construction involved in the pipeline.
Just to follow up on that, so why was the Blue Ship why was that cited but not sanctioned?
As you know, PISA lays out the requirements. It lays out what we are required to do in terms of implementing our sanctions authority. We have consistently followed the law, as we always do. We'll continue to do that. As for the specifics of a particular vessel or entity, that's just not something I'm prepared to go into today.
Okay, because I mean, it was my understanding that it was not sanctioned because it is owned by a German foundation, and so the administration essentially did not want to, like with the Nord Stream 2 AG waiver, did not want to sanction a ship belonging to a German government entity.
Well, we have worked very closely with our German allies. I spoke already to the joint statement that we released with the Germans, a joint statement that at its heart is about a package of support for our Ukrainian partners, and the support that we, together with our German allies, are providing to our Ukrainian partners. You know that package of support entailed various assurances. It entailed a fund that our Ukrainian partners can tap into to offset some of the potential implications of an operational Nord Stream 2 pipeline. So this has been a topic of intense diplomacy, and had been a topic of intense diplomacy, and still is a topic of conversation with our German allies. It's something that we regularly discuss with our Ukrainian partners, Nord Stream 2 specifically, but also Ukraine's energy security and the imperative of ensuring that Ukraine is not held hostage to the whims of any other country when it comes to energy flows.
And just the last thing from me then. So, I mean, are you at all worried that, I mean, what appears to have happened in this case is you had a ship that was working on Nord Stream 2 on the construction of the pipeline, and then as a way of avoiding sanctions, the beneficial ownership of that ship was essentially transferred to a German government entity under the knowledge that by doing so it would avoid sanctions. So, I mean, are you worried that there is a loophole here that companies working on Nord Stream 2 could essentially exploit, given this administration's unwillingness to sanction entities that are in any way affiliated with the German government?
Nick, we have sanctioned and consistently applied PISA as it is written. We have now sanctioned 8 persons, identified 17 of their vessels as blocked property pursuant to PISA in connection with Nord Stream 2. As I was saying before, we'll continue to examine entities engaged in potentially sanctionable activity in line with our commitment, and it is a commitment to implement PISA. So again, I'm not in a position from here to go into the details of ships, entities, but rest assured, PISA is something we are committed to, continuing to demonstrate our opposition to Nord Stream 2 and our commitment to Ukraine's energy security is something we will continue to do.
I wanted to ask you about Russia, Ukraine. If you, since all your warnings over the last week and days, I think there was a call today between the chief of staff. Has there been any diplomatic engagement? Has the secretary spoken with his counterpart, Sergei Lavrov? And are you still worried about what's going on at the border between Ukraine and Russia, or are you less worried than you were 1 week ago?
Well, nothing about our concern has changed. You heard the Secretary reiterate that concern over the weekend on his travels. I spoke to this yesterday as well. The reports of the unusual Russian military activity near Ukraine's borders, along Ukraine's borders, is a cause for concern. It's a cause for concern for the United States. It's a cause for concern for our Ukrainian partners. It's also a cause for concern for our European allies as well. That is why in recent weeks we have had extensive consultations and engaged in concerted diplomacy with not only Ukraine but also our European allies. During many of these meetings we've discussed our concerns about Russia's military activities, its harsh rhetoric towards Ukraine, its actions in the past, and I think the allusion to the past is important here. Because yes, there are reports of unusual military activity, but that unusual military activity doesn't come in a vacuum. It comes in the context of the Russian Federation that in 2014, some 7 years ago, undertook similar activities only to amass forces along the border and then to falsely, speciously claim pretextual provocation and to cross that border illegally, continuing its aggression against Ukraine. So we've held discussions with Russian officials as well in the context of all of this. We've spoken publicly to some of those engagements. Many of those engagements have come out of this building. Some of those engagements have taken place out of other buildings, including the National Security Council has read out some of those engagements. As you know, the intelligence community and CIA Director Burns' travel to Moscow took place in recent weeks. In all of this, our engagement with our European allies, with our Ukrainian partners, we have underscored our rock-solid commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, to Ukraine's security, and we've also made clear, both with our allies and with the Russian Federation, that any escalatory or aggressive moves by Russia would be of great concern to the United States. And we've called for an immediate restoration of the July 2020 ceasefire in Donbass.
And is there any decision, or imminent decision about sending more weapons to Ukraine, as they often request?
Well, as you know, we are in regular consultation and dialogue with our Ukrainian partners about their defensive needs. We don't have anything to announce or preview at this time, but we announced that we'd be sending more than $60 million in security assistance during President Zelensky's visit to the U.S. earlier this year in late August, I believe it was, as part of our strategic partnership with Ukraine. And we've sent more than $400 million overall this year to support Ukraine's sovereignty. Since the beginning of this administration, we've demonstrated that we are willing and able to use a number of tools to address Russia's harmful activities, and we won't hesitate from making use of those tools as appropriate in the future as well. Andrea.
What do you draw from the fact that Russia so far is ignoring all of this pressure, all of your calls, all of the international diplomacy?
Well, again, we don't know Russia's intentions. We don't know precisely what Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin might be planning. But we do know a couple things. We do know what has been observed, including in public accounts about this unusual Russian military activity along the border. We do know the history, and that history is not at all reassuring in terms of previous steps that the Russian Federation took in 2014 that in some ways looked at least similar to this and led to an outcome that was deeply disturbing in terms of the military aggression against Ukraine. So we are taking all of that. We are comparing what is in what we have in our holdings. We are sharing information. We are sharing intelligence with our European allies, with Ukraine as well. Of course, the foreign minister was here just the other week and had an opportunity to meet directly with Secretary Blinken and his team, just as Secretary Blinken had an opportunity to meet, as did President Biden, with President Zelensky in Scotland at COP26. We also saw the foreign minister at COP26, where this was a subject as well. So it is not for us to say what the Russian Federation may be planning. It is for us to say what we're doing in response. And we are engaged in concerted diplomacy. We are making sure through a number of ways that our European allies know, that Ukraine knows, and importantly that the Russian Federation knows that our commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty, to its independence, to its territorial integrity is rock solid.
Is there a red line, and do you have any proposals to bring to either the NATO ministerial or to the OSCE meeting?
Look, we will take advantage of every opportunity we have, including multilateral opportunities that may be coming up in the coming days, including potentially with NATO, to make very clear our concerns, to share concerns, to compare notes with our NATO allies as well. The bottom line for us is clear. Any escalatory or aggressive actions would be of great concern to the United States, but it would not just be of concern to us, it would be of great concern, we have heard, you have heard, to our European allies as well. Yes?
Just on Russia.
Sure.
I just want to push back a little bit on what you're saying. So you're consulting with your allies. So all of you guys are sitting in rooms having Zoom calls and telling each other, like, we don't know what Russia is intending to do. We have no idea what they're doing. I mean, this is, sorry, this is respectfully, this is a little bit, unthinkable.
Well,
like,
respectfully, that's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we're
but I mean,
saying that.
But it's just like we don't know what Russia is intending to do. That's just, certainly you have an assessment, and certainly you guys must be working on certain scenarios. Because otherwise, if you have no idea what they're doing, then doesn't that mean that U.S. is not prepared for what's coming? Right?
We are prepared and preparing for a number of contingencies.
Right.
And you can understand why the level of detail that I offer here is, of course, going to be consistent with what we say in private, but it probably will not be as extensive, and it certainly won't be as extensive as are our private consultations with our European allies, with our Ukrainian partners. Those consultations are ongoing. I can assure you it is not as you characterized it. These are in-depth conversations. We have sent senior officials from the department to provide detailed briefings to our European allies. We provided detailed information to Ukraine as well, and we will continue not only to share information, but to prepare for a range of contingencies. I can assure you that's what we're doing.
And those contingencies involve a repeat of 2014?
look, it's not prudent for me to go into that from here, but it is prudent for us to engage in a broad range of contingency planning.
Can I just follow up on that?
Sure.
Quick? So, if you guys are, aiming at contingency options, clearly you've made a calculation that it's not in the U.S. and European interest to lay those out explicitly. So why are you making that calculation? What is the benefit of keeping those contingencies close held and not publicly told as a deterrence to what Russia's doing?
Well, in some ways, the fact that we are speaking about this openly, the fact that we are acknowledging our concerns, the fact that we have made no secret of our consultations with Ukraine, with our European partners, the fact that we have not been shy in voicing our concerns about what we're seeing now, the public reports and information we have about Russia's unusual military activities, and layering that on top of what we saw in 2014. We are saying all of this to make clear not only to Ukraine our rock-solid commitment, but also to the Russian Federation. And you've seen similar statements from some of our European allies. You've seen statements from Ukraine as well when it comes to this. Look, it is not prudent for us to go into great detail about precisely the sort of information we have, precisely the planning and consultations that we're engaging in with our allies and partners, but that is taking place, and it is part of a prudent preparatory process so that we would be able to address a range of scenarios. We do know that Russia's aggression against Ukraine, it was not a one-time event in 2014. Of course, Russia's illegal occupation of Crimea and its presence in eastern Ukraine continues. Of course, its aggression in terms of rhetoric, in terms of other potentially hybrid actions have continued. So all of that is a cause for great concern. And that is also why we have continued to stand by Ukraine, to stand by them not only rhetorically is important, including for reasons of potentially deterrence, but also the security assistance that we've provided. The $60 million that was announced in the context of President Zelensky's visit, the $400 million that has been committed to our Ukrainian partners since the start of this administration.
So if they don't respond to what you guys are pointing out publicly, at some point, will you explicitly say what your physical response is going to be? Or it's not there yet?
Our public statements will be calibrated based on what we see, but more importantly, the actions we take, the steps we take, will be pursuant to what we see. Right now, we're engaged in diplomacy. We are speaking openly to what we're seeing. We're acknowledging the process in which we're engaged, and pursuant to what we see on the ground or what we don't see on the ground, we'll change our rhetoric, we'll change potentially our actions as well.
And last question, the $60 million in security assistance that was announced over the summer, what portion of that has already gone to Ukraine, and when should we expect that to be fully delivered?
Well, our embassy in Kiev, even in recent days, has issued tweets about various deliveries, including of certain defensive weapon systems. So we have made those deliveries public, and I think from that you can get a sense of the pace and the scope of the provision of material that's been supplied.
Okay.
Yes, Lada.
Continuing on